In June of 2018, 20-year-old Caleb Morris went on a lonely hike in Canyonlands National Park, Utah. He was last seen near a steep descent that the locals call the Golden Staircase. 3 days later, a large-scale rescue operation was launched in these canyons, but no trace of the boy was found. 3 months passed, and when two climbers who were training on the labyrinth's southern wall noticed a dark hole in the rock, they did not know that one of the most eerie finds in the park's history was waiting for them inside. In a narrow natural cave beneath a layer of ash lay the body of Caleb Morris, surrounded by hundreds of burnt matches that covered the bottom of the stone trap, as if testimony to his last attempts to see the light. Caleb Morris was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was 20 years old, an age when life seems endless and yet meaningless. A former university football player who had been suspended from the team after a fight at practice, he was going through a rough patch. His friends recalled that after this incident, Caleb became withdrawn, hardly left the house, and only answered the question, "What's next?" with a "What's next?" "I need to figure out what to do." A few weeks before he disappeared, he told his parents that he wanted to go to Utah to hike a challenging route in the Canyonlands to clear his head. His plan was detailed and precise. On June 24, 2018, Caleb stopped by the Hans Flat Ranger Station Visitor Center, where he left a copy of his route, starting at the Golden Stairs, then descending for several days into an area known among tourists as the Maze, a real maze of canyons and dry streams. The ranger who accepted his application later recalled that the guy seemed calm, but was silent for longer than usual. His journey was captured by cameras at the Hite Marina gas station, the last place to buy water and fuel before entering the park. The footage showed Caleb filling up the tank of his white SUV, buying several energy bars, a water flask, and a map of the region. The cashier, local resident Cindy Gray, later said that he asked if there were any extra matches on sale. She advised him to buy 3 boxes in case he didn't get back by the evening. According to other hikers, Caleb set out on the route the next morning. A group of 3 people saw him around 8 o'clock at the bottom of the Golden Stairs. One of them, Travis Holden, told police that the boy was walking slowly with a large backpack and did not respond to greetings. He seemed focused or tired. This was the last confirmed testimony. Then there was silence. 4 days later, when their son did not get in touch, the parents contacted the San Juan County Sheriff's Office. A search operation began that evening. Caleb's white SUV was found parked in a parking lot near the trailhead. Inside were the usual items: a bottle of water, a sketch pad, and a map of the park not yet unfolded. There were no signs of struggle or haste. The Rangers set up search headquarters near Hans Flat. On the first night, a helicopter with a thermal imager worked over the canyon, but in the heat of the day, its sensors did not pick up anything. The next day, volunteers from Moab and several dog teams joined in. The dogs picked up a faint trail from the parking lot, but lost it among the stone plateaus, a place where the wind erases the scent in a few hours. Canyonlands does not forgive mistakes. Here, the temperature reaches 40 degrees Celsius during the day and plummets at night. Water is the only chance for survival, and even experienced travelers carry it with them. Ranger Todd Allison, who led the search, wrote in his report, "In this part of the park, one mistake and a person disappears without a trace. No trails, no signal, just rock and sun." During the first week, the search teams combed over 30 square miles of territory. They used drones and looked at aerial photos, but found only old tire tracks, the remains of many other hikers, and no items that could be linked to Caleb. On the 4th day, one of the volunteers reported seeing fresh boot prints near the bed of a dried-up stream. But experts determined that the tracks were left by animals, coyotes or foxes. The parents arrived in Utah on the 5th day of the search. Every day they waited at the headquarters, watched the rescuers return from the canyon covered in dust and nodding silently to indicate that there was nothing new. The local press began to write about the disappearance of the young athlete from New Mexico, and TV channels showed footage of endless cliffs where even helicopters looked tiny. The last 3 days of the search were the most difficult. Heat, wind, stone mazes with no landmarks. The pilots reported that even from the air, it was difficult to distinguish a shadow from a cavity in the rock. One of the rescuers admitted to journalists, "Here you can walk a few meters away from a person and never notice them." On the 11th day, the search operation was scaled back. Part of the forces were left for periodic overflights and checks, but Caleb Morris was officially declared missing. His name was added to the federal database of missing persons in national parks. For the family, this was not a verdict, but a void. The rangers who participated in the search later admitted that this case left them with a sense of incompleteness. Usually, in such cases, they find at least a backpack, shoes, or pieces of equipment, but this time, nothing. Only emptiness, the echo of their own footsteps and the endless silence of the labyrinth which absorbs everything that gets inside. Canyonlands regained its peace, but for the Morrises, every day was a repeat of that first call when the connection was lost. Their son went looking for silence and became a part of it. As more than 2 weeks passed after Caleb Morris disappeared, the search operation began to fade. The heat was becoming unbearable. The stones were heating up during the day, so that even at night they were giving off the hot breath of the desert. A helicopter with a thermal imager took off every morning, but among the thousands of hot rocks, the devices recorded nothing but the blinding glare of the sun. From the air, the area resembled another planet. Chaotic canyons, endless plateaus, a maze of cracks and dry streams where even a shadow seemed like a ghost. 3 groups of rescuers and volunteers were working on the ground. They descended into the deepest depressions, checked caves, slopes, and rock fragments. They had to crawl through some areas, securing themselves with ropes. One of the rescuers recalled that the smell of hot stone was so thick that it was as if the earth itself was on fire. Every day of the search ended in the same way, to no avail. The operation was officially terminated on the 19th day. The Park Service report states that over 40 square miles of territory were surveyed during this time. Drones, thermal imagers, and 3 search dogs were used. No new finds were made, not a single item that could be attributed to Caleb. Only old footprints of other hikers and a few abandoned plastic bottles that were irrelevant. After the field work was wrapped up, the case was handed over to the San Juan County Sheriff's Department. The investigation was assigned to Detective Mark Gens, an experienced officer who had worked similar cases in mountainous areas. He started with the most obvious thing, checking the route left by Caleb at the Hans Flat Ranger Station. The map showed that the boy planned to return the same way he came down, via the Golden Stairs. No witnesses saw him on the way back up. The first version was the simplest: an accident. The labyrinth is full of faults and vertical cracks that are more than 10 meters deep. If a person falls inside, it is almost impossible to find the body. The second version is an attack by a wild animal. The report states that there are cougars in the area, although cases of attacks on humans are extremely rare. However, there was no blood, no remains of clothing, and no signs of a struggle. The third version is a voluntary disappearance, but financial reports showed that his account remained intact. All cards, phone, and documents remained in the car. No transfers, purchases, or bookings after June 24th. The detective interviewed everyone who had seen Caleb before the hike. The ranger who took his application said that the boy looked focused but not depressed. The gas station attendant at Hite Marina remembered him as polite but strangely silent. The volunteers who participated in the search were unable to find any new footprints. The labyrinth was silent. A few weeks later, when the case had almost become an archival one, a tourist from Colorado named Nathan Wood approached the police. He claimed that on the day Caleb disappeared, he had taken several pictures of the landscape near the Chocolate Drops Formation. One of them showed the figure of a man in a dark jacket standing on the edge of a ledge, looking down into a narrow side canyon. Wood didn't pay much attention to it until he saw a photo of the missing boy on the news. Experts compared the outlines, height, shape of the backpack, even the location of the hat, and everything matched. This gave a new direction for the search, but the area Caleb was looking at turned out to be one of the most dangerous in the entire park. There were no trails, no communication, and even a helicopter couldn't land because of the uneven surface. Detective Hance ordered a second flight with high-resolution cameras. For 3 days, they filmed every ravine, every shadow. But even this time, not a single hint. The footage shows only endless cliffs that shimmer in the air. Meanwhile, the Morris family kept trying. Caleb's father, Paul, along with volunteers, continued the search for several weeks after the official end of the operation. He printed posters with his son's photo on his own and put them up in the towns around the park: Moab, Hanksville, Green River. The mother, Laura, agreed to an interview with a local television station where she tearfully asked anyone who might have been in the labyrinth in those days to report even the slightest detail. Hundreds of viewers saw their performance, and within a week, the police received dozens of calls. Someone claimed to have seen Caleb on the highway near the town of Monticello, while others said he spent the night at a campsite in Moab. But none of the versions were confirmed. Surveillance cameras, hotel reports, and bank records all pointed to the opposite. After June 24th, he disappeared forever. In August, the case was officially classified as a cold case. The documents state the probable cause of the disappearance is an accident in difficult environmental conditions. In reality, this meant only one thing: the investigation was suspended until new facts emerged. But for those who knew Caleb, the accident story seemed too simple. His friends said that he was attentive, experienced in hiking, and well-versed in the terrain. He didn't take unnecessary risks and never strayed from the route. Why then is he standing on the edge of an unknown canyon in the photo, looking down as if something had called him there? 3 months have passed. Canyonlands regained its usual silence. Tourists were again photographing the red walls, rangers were making their daily rounds, and the sign at Hans Flat Ranger Station had only one short pencil note among the old records: K. Morris, route the maze, return unknown. And somewhere between these stone labyrinths, where the wind carries away even a trace of footsteps, his name became part of a local legend about a guy who disappeared into the silence of the canyon and whom the desert never let go. It's been a little over 3 months since the search for Caleb Morris was officially called off. His name remained only in police reports and on a plaque among the missing in Canyonlands. But at the end of September 2018, the labyrinth reminded us of itself again. That morning, 3 climbers from Salt Lake City were exploring the south rim of the canyon. Their route ran through a section where even experienced athletes rarely ventured down. Too steep, too much loose sandstone. One of them, Evan Ross, noticed a narrow opening between 2 slabs of rock. It was not visible from below. The opening was hidden under an overhanging ledge, like an entrance to an alien world. According to the climbers, everything looked like an ordinary niche until the light of the flashlight went deeper inside. The beam slid down and suddenly fell into the void. There, under a layer of dust, was a vertical well. One of the participants in the descent, experienced in rescue operations, decided to check how deep it was. They secured a rope and, moving cautiously downward, descended about 6 to 7 meters. What they saw at the bottom made them stop working immediately and call the rangers. At the bottom of the natural well, in a small space no more than 2 meters wide, were human remains. The skeleton was in a sitting position with its back to the wall. Next to it were an empty plastic bottle, a backpack, several matchboxes, and a flashlight without batteries. The climbers, they said, did not touch anything. They took a few pictures and went upstairs. That evening, the area was sealed off, and Park Service employees and forensic experts from San Juan County arrived at the site. The inspection took a long time. The descent to the well was extremely difficult, a narrow passage, loose walls, and the danger of collapse. The experts only went down the next morning. The first pictures showed that the body had been there for several months. His belongings were not scattered. Everything looked as if the person had deliberately placed them nearby, preparing for a long wait. The cave in which he was found turned out to be a natural trap. Its entrance was located in the middle of the rock wall, which is impossible to reach without special equipment. Inside, it turned into a vertical well, from which it would have been impossible to get out without a rope. There were no traces of a collapse. This meant that the entrance had not been blocked after the fall, meaning that the person was conscious. When the experts brought the remains to the surface, the worst was confirmed. The dental records identified him as Caleb Morris. His shorts, t-shirt, and boots were partially preserved, and his backpack clearly showed his initials sewn on the inside pocket. The watch on his wrist stopped when the battery died, but the hands froze between 9 and 10 in the evening, making it impossible to determine the exact time. But the main discovery was different. The entire space of the well bottom, about a meter by a meter, was covered with a thick layer of burnt matches. There were hundreds, perhaps thousands of them. Dozens of empty boxes were lying around. The walls of the cave were smoked at the level of a person's height, as if he had been standing and lighting match after match, looking into the darkness. The medical examiner noted in his initial report that there were no signs of violence on the bones, no fractures, no signs of blows or struggle. Everything indicated that he was alive and conscious for some time. The only injury was a few scratches on his ribs, presumably caused by the fall. The bottle next to him was dried to the bottom. His water supply was exhausted. When the rangers examined the upper edge of the entrance, they found several rubber sole prints, old, partially worn away. Caleb probably tried to climb up, but the walls crumbled under his hands. The height of the well was too high to climb without assistance. Detective Mark Gens, who arrived at the scene, said in a report, "The cave looks like a perfect trap. You can get in by accident, but you can't get out on your own." On the surface, there were no signs of a struggle or an alien presence. It looked as if he had fallen into the hole himself, perhaps seeking shelter from the heat or hoping to find a shortcut through the rocks. When the body was transported to the morgue, experts noticed another detail. Caleb's fingers were charred, but not from the flames of a large fire. It looked like the result of prolonged contact with matches. Some of the boxes had traces of sweat, fingernails, and tiny pieces of skin on them, all indicating a desperate, almost mechanical attempt to keep the lights on. For the rangers who first saw the site, the scene was indelibly imprinted on their memories. One of them, a veteran of search operations, later told reporters, "I've seen a lot of things, falls, heat, people who were found years later. But something was different in that cave. It was as if he hadn't just died. He was looking into the darkness and trying to see something." Experts have suggested that Caleb could have been trapped by accident, having fallen while descending or exploring a side passage. But the sheer number of matches, more than 20 boxes, remained a mystery. Where did they come from? His belongings found in the car did not contain enough supplies for a long hike. Someone could have given them to him later, or he could have taken them from a place that has not yet been found. The official version of his death remains uncertain. The reason is dehydration and exhaustion. However, for those who saw the place, everything looked different. It was as if the labyrinth itself had dragged the boy into its bowels, forcing him to ignite the same tiny spark over and over again until it went out with his breath. Caleb's body was taken from the cave, but the labyrinth left traces of his presence. Black sooty walls, scattered matches, the smell of burning. All of this remained there under the overhang of the rock as a memory of a man who tried to avoid drowning in the darkness to the last. And the main question that remains unanswered is how he got there. Did he get there on his own, or was he thrown there by someone? When Caleb Morris's body was brought to the surface, the Rangers considered the case almost over. The reports already included the formula death by accident, and even Detective Jens, who was in charge of the investigation, admitted that the chance of finding something new was minimal. But a few days after the laboratory experts returned to the cave for an additional examination, everything changed. During the second examination, when soot samples were taken from the wall surface, a forensic scientist from Salt Lake City noticed an irregularity at the level of the man's chest. These were scratches, similar to natural cracks, but with a clear direction, all stretching from left to right, like handwriting lines. After cleaning the soot layer, letters appeared under the lantern. They were carved with a sharp object, possibly a piece of stone or a knife. The text consisted of several short phrases deeply carved into the stone. The record was difficult to read, but the words were legible. "I was thrown here by a tourist. Male, about 40 years old, tall, gray beard, red jacket. His name is Luke." This discovery was an explosion. All the versions built around the accident collapsed in an instant. The cave, which was considered the scene of the tragedy, turned into a crime scene. All the case files were transferred to the sheriff's criminal division, and the case was reclassified as a premeditated murder. Detective Hance later recalled that the feeling when he first saw the photograph of the inscription was as if the dead boy himself had reached out to him from the darkness. It was not just a message, but an eyewitness account left at the cost of his last strength. The text had everything: a description, a name, and most importantly, a statement that he had been thrown down. Investigators immediately returned to the site of the discovery. Every inch of the cave was photographed again, prints were taken, and a three-dimensional scan of the walls was made. The microscope showed that the letters were carved unevenly, with hand tremors, but consistently. The person worked slowly, trying to leave a mark. On the last letters, the depth of the scratches decreased, as if his strength was leaving him. Experts from the Utah Department of Public Safety confirmed the authenticity of the inscription. The marks on the stone matched the materials found in the cave, including fragments of quartzite that could have been used as a cutting tool. Thus, the text was created by Caleb himself. The description of the suspect then went out to all police stations in San Juan, Grand, and Garfield counties. A short message was broadcast on local news stations that evening. Utah police are looking for a man who may have been involved in the death of hiker Caleb Morris. Description: middle-aged man, gray beard, red jacket, name Luke. The search began with places where Caleb could have crossed paths with other travelers. They checked the footage from the cameras at the entrance to the park, the parking lot near the Golden Stairs, and the video from the Haight Marina gas station. In one of the shots taken the day before the hike, a man in a red jacket is indeed visible behind Caleb. His face was not completely in the lens, but police officers recognized his height, posture, and clothing details as similar. This was the first confirmation that Caleb was not alone in the canyon. In the following weeks, detectives traveled around the surrounding towns of Moab, Hanksville, and Torrey. They checked campgrounds, cafes, small hotels, and talked to store employees. One roadside motel owner said that in early June, a man named Luke, with a graying beard, traveling in an old Ford pickup truck, stayed with him. He spent only one night there and left a strange impression: silent but attentive, as if he was constantly listening to the sounds around him. When asked to sign the guest book, he left only the initials LE. The police seized footage from the motel's surveillance cameras. The footage shows a man with a reddish-gray beard entering the room, carrying a large backpack. He is indeed wearing a red jacket. This video became a key piece of evidence. He matched the description left on the wall. However, it turned out to be extremely difficult to track this man. The pickup's license plate didn't fully capture the camera's field of view, and no trace of him was found in the booking database or bank transactions. He had paid in cash. Everything looked like this. Luke was used to disappearing without a trace. The detectives did not rule out that the conflict could have occurred on the trail, perhaps over a trifle, as is common among hikers who spend days in isolation and exhaustion. However, the motive remained unclear. Caleb had no money, jewelry, or valuable equipment. His old backpack and a simple knife could not have attracted a robber. Then why would he be thrown into the well? Experts in behavioral psychology suggested that the suspect could have been an aggressive loner, a person who lives on wheels, stays near national parks, and stays away from people. Such travelers often leave no official trace. They sleep in their cars, don't use maps, and don't talk to police. Caleb's parents learned about the inscription from the news. After that, the boy's mother agreed to give a short interview for a local channel. She spoke quietly, trying to hold back her tears. "We know now that he was not alone. He tried to tell us who did it. He fought even when he realized there was no chance." Her words were quoted in many Utah newspapers. After this appeal appeared, the police received dozens of calls. People reported seeing a man in a red jacket in different parts of the state, some on the highway near Arcus, others in a motel near Moab. Each report was checked, but the results were inconclusive. None of the witnesses could say exactly when they saw the man, and most importantly, whether it was indeed the same man. An official press conference held in late October showed that the investigation had entered an active phase. A manhunt was launched for an unidentified tourist named Luke, aged approximately 40, who may have been in Canyonlands Park between June 23rd and June 27th. His photo, reconstructed from eyewitnesses' descriptions and camera footage, was published in all regional media. For the detectives, the case turned into a real hunt. For the first time in several months, they had a name, a face, and a story that could be traced. Someone in a red jacket with a graying beard was walking the same path as Caleb. And if the words engraved on the cold wall are true, he was the last person he saw before he died. At the end of October, the investigation into the case of Caleb Morris received an unexpected breakthrough. New surveillance footage recovered from a roadside station on a highway near the town of Hanksville gave investigators what they had been waiting for months: a clear image of the face of a man wearing a red jacket. The cameras captured him leaving the store with a bag of groceries, getting into a dark SUV, and driving off in the direction of Canyonlands Park. After running the footage through a federal database, the image was recognized. It was Luke Evans, 42 years old, a resident of Salt Lake City. A former warehouse worker for a transportation company, no family, no fixed address for the past several years. His file revealed a very different past than was initially assumed. He already had a criminal record for assault, robbery, and weapons possession. He was imprisoned twice, the last time for a fight in which he seriously injured a man during an attempted robbery in a parking lot. After his early release, he disappeared from the police's sight. Detectives immediately realized that this was not a tourist or a wandering traveler. This is an experienced criminal who knows how to disappear. Evans had been working at the warehouse for only a few months, and then, according to his colleagues, he simply did not show up for his shift. He was last seen in early summer, around the time Caleb left for his hike. Investigators checked his last contacts. The phone registered in Evans' name had not been used since late June. Bank cards were also silent. This meant that he was either living entirely on cash or had long since left the city. But the more the detectives learned, the clearer the picture became. Evans was acting like a hunter. His former warehouse partner, who agreed to testify, described him as a quiet but very attentive man. He said that Luke often talked about easy money and bragged about knowing places where you can find fools with wallets. In his locker after his release, several maps of national parks were found: Canyonlands, Zion, Bryce Canyon, all with markings of routes rarely used by tourists. Analysis of phone data confirmed that Evans had visited remote areas of these parks on multiple occasions. Over the past 2 or 3 years, he regularly turned off his phone for several days in areas without communication, and then reappeared in cities where he pawned or sold tourist equipment, tents, backpacks, expensive cameras, online. It all looked like a well-established scheme. Criminal analysis experts called his type of behavior a mobile predatory model. This is how criminals act who prey not on specific people, but on situations. They choose a victim from among those traveling alone, then they attack and rob them quickly, and the traces are lost in deserted places. National parks, where the distances between camps are tens of miles, have become an ideal environment for such predators. Evans, according to investigators, used a simple but effective method. He waited until the tourist moved away from the main routes and then followed him. He would attack suddenly, most often in the evening. Taking money, phones, and equipment, he would get rid of witnesses, knowing that the body in the desert might not be found for years. The FBI report states that at least 5 people have disappeared in the parks of southern Utah over the past 3 years. All of them were loners traveling alone, all of them on sparsely populated trails. Until then, no one connected the cases. It was only after Luke Evans was identified that commonalities began to emerge: time, place, and manner of disappearance. One of the investigators working on another case, the disappearance of a tourist from Flagstaff, recalled that one of the video cameras at the gas station also showed a man in a red jacket. At the time, this fact was not considered important. Now they watched it again, and the face was the same. Gradually, the portrait of a man who had turned crime into a craft was emerging. Evans was not a madman or a serial killer in the classical sense. He acted calculatingly, coldly, with mathematical precision. His crimes were quick, untraceable, and minimally risky. Luke Evans did not leave a body. He left an absence, and this absence lasted for years. His only mistake was that he threw Caleb not into an empty ravine, but into a natural trap where he could leave a message. It was this inscription that destroyed his perfect chain of impunity. When experts compared the dates, routes, and eyewitness accounts, it turned out that Evans was in the Canyonlands area on the very days Caleb disappeared. In his old car, which was later found abandoned near the highway, there was a map with a red marker circling the maze area. The detectives realized that he had planned his routes in advance using topographic maps, where he marked not hiking trails, but hidden passages, water sources, and places from which to observe travelers. Such records indicate a systematic approach. He was not just wandering, he was tracking. It also turned out that Evans had several fictitious accounts in Salt Lake City on online platforms where he sold equipment. Among the lots were items that matched the descriptions of the missing tourist's property. The evidence was not yet direct, but the puzzle was beginning to take shape. A former FBI officer invited as a consultant wrote in his report, "Evans does not act on impulse. He thinks like a hunter. Every hike is a hunting season for him." When investigators looked through his social media photo archive, they noticed another pattern. In the pictures taken in different parks, he always stood a little apart from other tourists. And he always wore a red jacket, his mark, like a sign that everyone could see, but no one perceived as a danger. After his name was made public, reports began pouring in from people across Utah claiming to have seen Evans in parking lots or near trails. One lifeguard from the town of Page said that in the summer of 2017, the man came to the station to ask about the least traveled routes. No one paid attention then. Now this detail has become part of the picture. It became obvious to the police Caleb was not the first, but probably the last victim in a series that was simply overlooked. The criminal's trail led through deserts and canyons, lost on the borders of Arizona and Utah. And most importantly, no one knew where he was now. Canyonlands became a place of search again, but now they were looking not for a missing tourist, but for a hunter who hunted people like Caleb. Luke Evans had turned the deserted trails into his business and his territory, until one mistake broke his silence. Once Luke Evans was identified, the investigation went far beyond San Juan County. The Federal Bureau of Investigation officially became involved. In a few weeks, the FBI created a separate analytical team to analyze all the disappearances of tourists in national parks in the southwestern United States over the past few years. The team included forensic geographers, behavioral profilers, and digital finance experts. From the very beginning, the investigation was based on one simple idea. Evans did not act chaotically. He planned routes and chose places where the disappearance of a person seemed to be an accident. So the detectives decided to trace his movements in recent years. All the data obtained from surveillance cameras, receipts, and records in the automobile registry databases were compiled into a single map. And when the first points appeared on the screen, the pattern became obvious. From June of 2016 to the summer of 2018, a series of mysterious disappearances of travelers were recorded in 3 states: Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. Almost all of them occurred in the spring or fall, during the off-season, when the tourist flow is lowest. This is when rescue services reduce their patrols and locals are less likely to travel to the mountains. 2 or 3 disappearances in a year. Always different parks, always with no obvious signs of struggle. The analysis showed that there are hundreds of miles between these places, but Evans always moved along the same line: Canyonlands, Zion, Bryce Canyon. On the map, this formed a kind of triangle with his routes in the middle. FBI experts called this pattern a spatial cycle, a typical model for a hunter who operates in a familiar environment but changes the point of impact each time to avoid leaving patterns. The detectives returned to old cases. One case in particular stood out among them: the disappearance of a 25-year-old photographer from Colorado, Jason Hale. He disappeared in Zion National Park a year before Caleb Morris disappeared. His car was found in a parking lot near the Angels Landing trailhead, but Hale himself was not. All his documents, clothes, and water were still in the car. The only strange thing was the disappearance of his camera, a professional Japanese model that he always carried with him. A few days after Hale's disappearance, police found a receipt from a camera store in Salt Lake City in his backpack, which was found on the side of the road. The salesperson recalled that the man had bought a new lens and said he was going on a trip to take a series of pictures of the canyons at dawn. After that, he was never heard from again. When FBI agents were looking through social media archives, they came across an old profile of Luke Evans, created long before Caleb disappeared. Among his posts were photos of various tourist equipment for sale. One of them showed the same camera that the sheriff's department was looking for in the Jason Hale case. The resemblance was 100%, right down to the serial number, which experts were able to partially recognize in the photo. This match was the first direct evidence that Evans' crimes were systemic. He didn't just attack people, he monetized his crimes. The stolen items were sold on small online platforms under the guise of used equipment. Mostly, these were things that were easy to sell without documents: cameras, binoculars, travel watches, knives, solar panels. The FBI's financial unit got on the digital trail. Evans used a cryptocurrency wallet registered under a fake name. This account regularly received small amounts from different users after selling goods through closed online forums. Over 2 years, he earned about $20,000 in this way, enough to travel without an official job, live in motels, and not attract attention. When the agents reconstructed his movements, it turned out that he followed an almost ritualistic discipline. In the spring, he would take short trips to Zion or Bryce Canyon, and in the fall, he would go to Canyonlands. In the summer, he would disappear, possibly traveling out of state. All of his routes took him through unpopulated roads, remote campgrounds, and places where there was no cell phone service. This behavior was not accidental. It guaranteed impunity. Behavioral analysts described Evans as a person with a high level of self-control. He did not leave emotional traces. He did not write letters, did not contact relatives, did not brag about his actions. His motivation was not pleasure, but a sense of superiority, control over the space and the people who disappeared into it. One of the agents put it simply, "He acted like a trader who buys life cheaply and sells it in pieces." The investigation began to connect the various stories into a single chain. At least 6 disappearances were found in FBI databases that matched Evans's scheme. Loners, remote trails, no witnesses, missing electronics. After each case, similar ads appeared on the online sales marketplace. The evidence was not yet conclusive, but the picture was becoming clearer. The investigators were faced with the image of a criminal who did not act on the call of rage, but worked like a predator, calculating the energy of each step. He organized his activities in space like a map with seasonal hunts. Caleb Morris's disappearance was only the latest point in this geography of death. Federal agents were preparing a request to banks and crypto exchanges, trying to track where the money was being withdrawn. At the same time, other teams were checking every motel, campground, and auto repair shop where he might have stayed. All the witnesses described a similar man, silent, with a graying beard, wearing a red jacket, who never said where he was going. For the FBI, this investigation was an example of a new type of crime, a hybrid between conventional crime and a nomad who turned wildness into a cover. Evans left no traces of civilization behind, only traces of missing people. And now the detectives were faced with the main question: where to find him if his world is hundreds of miles of desert, rocks, and silent canyons that hide their secrets? After several months of analyzing digital traces, the investigation has reached a decisive stage. The FBI managed to track the activity of a crypto wallet belonging to Luke Evans. Despite being cautious, he continued to use his account from time to time, with small transactions coming from different users, which indicated that he was still selling things. The operatives realized that direct evidence of the murders was difficult to find. But if they managed to contact him during the transaction, they could get confirmation of his activities, and most importantly, find the place where he kept the rest of the things, possibly material evidence. It was decided to set up a controlled trap. The FBI created a fake profile under the name of Harry Campbell, an allegedly wealthy tourist looking for antique hiking equipment. The marketplace employees helped the agents to convince him. They created a page with several ads, real photos, and even reviews of previous purchases. On one of the forums for collectors, an undercover agent left a comment that he was looking for a unique Japanese camera with a manual lens. This is exactly the kind of product recently posted by a user hiding behind a nickname that matched the name of Evans' crypto wallet. The contact was established via an encrypted messenger. The undercover agent introduced himself as a collector and offered to buy the camera for cash, without tracking. 2 days later, he received a response. The seller agreed to a meeting in Las Vegas, explaining that he did not send equipment by mail because of previous problems with buyers. This was a signal to law enforcement that Evans felt so confident that he was ready to meet in person. The operation was called Canyon. It involved 12 FBI agents and local police officers. The meeting point was a parking lot near a large shopping center on the outskirts of Vegas. It was there, among dozens of cars and constant traffic, that it was easiest to act unnoticed. The day of the operation came in mid-February. The weather was dry, the sky was cloudless, and the asphalt, warmed by the sun, vibrated with heat. The undercover agent arrived early and parked the rented SUV. In the trunk, next to the real tourist stuff, was marked cash. Surveillance was set up on the neighboring levels of the parking lot. 2 plainclothes agents and 2 more in a van with surveillance cameras. Around 3 in the afternoon, an old gray Ford pickup truck drove into the parking lot. It was driven by a middle-aged man with a gray beard and a red jacket. The cameras confirmed that it was Luke Evans. He behaved calmly, cautiously, but without visible fear. A pickup truck pulled up next to him. The agent approached, introduced himself, and offered to inspect the goods. Evans pulled out a black bag from the trunk which contained a camera in excellent condition. The agents watched his every move. When Evans handed the camera to the buyer, a signal was sent to the capture team. Within seconds, he was surrounded. 2 agents came up behind him, and 2 more blocked his pickup truck. Everything happened without a single shot being fired. According to eyewitnesses, he did not even try to escape. Witnesses standing in the parking lot later recalled that the man looked more surprised than scared, as if he did not understand what exactly had happened. When he was laid face down on the asphalt and handcuffed, he kept repeating, "I didn't do anything." A camera bag, cash, several flash drives, and a cell phone without a SIM card were seized at the scene. After his arrest, Evans was taken to the FBI office in Las Vegas. His fingerprints instantly confirmed his identity. He was listed in the database as a particularly dangerous repeat offender suspected of a series of attacks on tourists. During the first interrogation, he remained silent, refusing to comment, only asking for a lawyer. According to the agents, his calmness looked unnatural, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. That evening, a judge issued a search warrant for his home in Salt Lake City. The address listed in his old bank records was a small 2-story house on the outskirts of an industrial area. It stood alone, surrounded by an overgrown yard and several abandoned garages. Local residents said they saw Evans infrequently, usually at night when he would arrive for a few hours and disappear again. When the task force went inside, the air was filled with the heavy smell of dust and metal. The house looked abandoned, but a lamp was on in one of the rooms. On the table were maps, notebooks, and several flash drives. On the shelves were tourist equipment, different in brand and condition. It looked like a collection, but each item had a different story. The investigators stopped at the threshold. It no longer looked like a storehouse of stolen goods, but a personal archive. Experts from the cyber department immediately took the computer, which was running in a secure mode. It could have contained sales lists or photos. The preliminary results indicated that the evidence against Evans could be much more serious than just trafficking in stolen goods. But officially, the investigation continued to talk only about an attempt to illegally sell things obtained by criminal means. In the Vegas parking lot, everything looked ordinary. A tourist and a seller, a brief meeting, cameras recording the handshake and the transfer of goods. But for investigators, it was a point of no return. They had caught a man who had remained invisible among the canyons for years. But the main task ahead was to understand how many lives were left behind these sales and what else his home on the outskirts of Salt Lake City held. The search of Luke Evans' home lasted 2 days. At first, detectives thought they had stumbled upon just another stash of stolen goods. But within hours of starting work, experts realized that they were on the verge of a completely different discovery. The house on the outskirts of Salt Lake City looked ordinary. Old furniture, stacks of cardboard boxes, dust settling even on light bulbs. However, in the kitchen, under a layer of linoleum, investigators noticed an uncharacteristic unevenness in the floor. When the flooring was lifted, a hatch with a homemade latch opened. Under it was a narrow space equipped as a storage room. There, in the darkness, were metal containers, neatly arranged next to each other. Inside each one were things that were not supposed to be together. In the first box were cell phones. There were more than 24 of them, different models and years, some damaged, others with memory cards removed. Several had names or initials scrawled on the back covers. Another box contained plastic flasks, some of them with marker writing. Jason, Rachel, Mark. Then there are cameras, wristwatches, camping knives, and several old backpacks. Everything is laid out with a strange meticulousness, as if not for storage, but for contemplation. But the most important thing was found in a small wooden chest. Inside was a diary, a thick leather-bound notebook written in small, neat handwriting. Each page began with the date and the name of the place: Canyonlands, Zion, Bryce Canyon. Each entry described the event with amazing accuracy, like an expedition report. There were no emotions, only cold observations: air temperature, wind direction, behavior of the object, and evaluation of the equipment. In the entry dated June 24, 2018, there was Caleb's name. The sentence that investigators later quoted in their reports was short: "I watched him all day. He withstood the heat, kept up the pace, didn't stop. He found an opening and fell in by himself. I watched him light matches, a dying candle." Next is a detailed description of the place, which completely coincided with the cave where the body was found. Evans wrote about how he left him there, convinced that no one would find him. His words sounded not like a confession, but like a scientist's observation of an experiment. Other names appeared in the records for the previous years, those who were reported missing in Zion, Bryce Canyon, and the Grand Staircase area. Each page contains coordinates, descriptions, and brief profiles of the victims. Young, inexperienced, very calm, not afraid, stopped when he saw me. No mention of remorse, only a repeated phrase: "Control is maintained." Investigators also found several flash drives. They contained photos taken from a great distance, apparently through binoculars or a telephoto lens. The pictures show tourists walking along the trails, sitting by the fire, setting up tents. Each shot was accompanied by a date and a short commentary. It was not just a collection, but a catalog of observations. Experts called it an archive of control. For Evans, these things were not trophies in the usual sense. They were symbols that he held power over space and over the people who were lost in it. His method was not physical cruelty, but a sense of invisible presence. He acted like a hunter who takes pleasure not in the strike, but in the moment when the victim realizes that it is impossible to escape. Caleb's description took up an entire chapter in the diary. Evans wrote that the boy reminded him of himself when he was younger: strong, stubborn, but overconfident. At the end of the entry was a sentence: "He saw the light he had created and extinguished it himself." For the detectives, this was proof not only of the crime, but also of the twisted logic that Evans was using. After the search was completed, all the found materials were transferred to the FBI crime lab in Denver. They confirmed it. The DNA on the flasks and knives belonged to at least 3 people who had been reported missing in different years. The cell phones taken from the boxes contained photos taken by the owners, the last pictures before they disappeared. The evidence was enough to bring charges of several first-degree murders. Prosecutors had no doubt that he would not get away with it this time. His crimes were not random, but systematic. Each tourist he killed was part of a distorted game of survival. When the investigators showed the photos to the families of the missing, most of them recognized their loved ones' belongings. For them, it was both painful and relieving. After years of silence, they finally got an answer. The story of Caleb Morris, which began with a simple hike in the Canyonlands, revealed the scale of crimes that could have remained hidden for years. For society, this case was a warning. The worst danger in the desert is not the heat or the rocks, but those who walk by without arousing suspicion. Luke Evans left no blood on his hands, only silence, a collection of other people's lives locked in the darkness of the floor of his house. And it was this silence that became the loudest evidence of his guilt.